the wonder of life. This is what we're going to be talking about in this week's feature discussion: pregnancy in Coronation Street. Because, you know, Leanne's in the club at the moment, and so we thought, well, what better time? Because pregnancy doesn't happen that much on Coronation Street, does it?
No.
Well, maybe
rare.
it does. We thought we would have a look back at some of all the old pregnancies in Coronation Street, look at some memorable ones, and kind of talk about how Coronation Street deals with a topic that I wouldn't say that either of us are particularly experts on.
No,
but,
not really.
We'll do our best to lend our unexpert opinion on it. Now, a lot of the information that I've got from here comes from Corriepedia. They've very handily got a list of all the births and terminations and miscarriages, all on one nice page on Corriepedia. So I've taken it from there, and I'm assuming that it's accurate. But there's anything that I've forgotten or whatever, don't blame me, blame Corriepedia. But according to this, there have been 39 births on Coronation Street. We're not going to be talking that much about births today. We'll probably leave that to another time. But 39 pregnancies that have resulted in live births. There have been 6 terminations and a whopping 14 miscarriages in the history of Coronation Street. Now, let's look back at some memorable pregnancies first. And looking at the list on Corriepedia, you can see straight away that back in the early days, having characters get pregnant wasn't quite so
it's probably illegal.
So much used as storyline as it is these days, because you went for the first few decades with barely anybody getting pregnant. The very first character to get pregnant was Linda Chevesky, who gave birth to Paul Chevesky in 1961. But I suppose looking at these characters here, one of the first biggest pregnancies in Coronation Street was when Sarah Louise was born in 1987. So the pregnancy there was quite a big deal, because Gail, who had been married to Brian at the time, was secretly having it off with his cousin Ian, because he was Australian, and, you know, hunky Australian beach bum or something, I don't know. But the relationship between Gail and Brian had been getting pretty sour already. He was getting a bit tired of married life, and so Gail and Ian had a fling. She was hoping that it could be a little bit more than this, but he was like, no mate, this is just a one night stand, I'm back off to Oz, do some surfing or whatever. And she gutted about this, tries to beg him not to go back, but he does. Brian finds out, he wants her to have an abortion, but she didn't, and the marriage sadly ended then. I think they got back together with each other for a little bit, but it was never the same afterwards, and then he got stabbed, so what are you going to do? So that was in a way the first Who's the Daddy storyline, because it turned out that Brian was obviously Sarah Louise's father, but it looked like that was one of the first times in Coronation Street history where there was some kind of big drama revolving around the pregnancy, rather than
just a baby.
These characters are of a certain age and they're going to have a baby together. And looking down this list, the Platt family, Platt, Tilsley, whatever you want to call them, a family, are some of the biggest offenders in dramatic storylines, because even a couple of years later, in 1990, when Gail was pregnant again with David, she was going to have an abortion then, because the dad was Martin Platt, who was, I think, like 20 years younger than her, or 10, I can't remember. I think it was 10 years younger than her. And she didn't want Martin to be tied down at such a young age, but he was the one in the end that decided, or persuaded her not to have an abortion. So the first abortion in Coronation Street, the actual one that went through, the first one was in the late 90s, I think. So they were talking about it earlier on, but didn't have the...
It was too terrible now.
Bit of a hot topic, even back in 1990.
But nowadays, it's like, oh, you're just going to have an abortion then, are you?
Well, yeah, because so many characters will get pregnant in Coronation Street. Some of them have got to have miscarriages and abortions, otherwise the street's going to be overrun with children. Yeah, you got to cull them somehow, haven't you? We had also some other interesting pregnancies. Denise Osborne got pregnant to Ken Barlow, which was kind of notable because of just how old he was at the time, back in 1995. And I also saw about this, which was quite interesting, that because he was the teacher back at Weatherfield High at the time, and the head mistress got a letter of complaint from a parent that he was possibly becoming a father to an illegitimate child, and it's like that seems like even something that wouldn't happen these days. Like if
imagine that.
An unmarried teacher gets somebody else pregnant, the parent's not going to write in a complaint about that.
Not necessarily people's private lives quite as much.
No, maybe not. So you always remember, and even though you didn't watch it back then, Sarah Louise is pregnant, going back to the Platts, don't you?
Yeah, because I was at school and I was similar age to her at the time, and everyone was talking about it because it was a pretty big deal when so Sarah gave birth on the 4th of June. What are you saying?
2000, yeah.
Yeah, 2000. But you start to open your mouth.
No, I've got nothing to say. It was the pregnancy more than the birth that was the drama, the scandal,
but
wasn't it?
I don't have the date for when she got pregnant.
I don't know. I don't have a date for any of these got pregnant.
Sarah Platt and Neil Ferns, who we said earlier in the episode, is now deceased. Both teenage layabouts. One of Corrie's most controversial stories because she was... How old was she?
I think she was 12 when she got pregnant and 13 when Bethany was born.
Really, really young. Even now, that is a shocking age. Very. I'm kind of glad that's not become normal.
No, I mean, it's not as... Sadly, not as unusual, because when we had Faye getting pregnant a few years ago, it wasn't such a scandalous affair, was it?
The thing is, I think teenage pregnancy rates have stabilised or gone not as bad as they used to be.
No.
At one point, the school I went to was one of the worst schools in Europe for teenage pregnancies. I don't understand why, because there were only a few girls that I knew that were. One girl
you didn't associate with that crowd, did you?
One girl turned up to get her, when we had our leaving ceremony, she turned up pregnant. Anyway,
that was
she wasn't the first teenage pregnancy in soaps, but she was the youngest.
Yeah, I think that there had been
12 is very young.
Yeah, I think there'd been a teenage pregnancy storyline in... It was either... I think it was EastEnders or Brookside, maybe, I can't remember before then. But this was so shocking just because of how young Sarah Louise was. And I think also at the time that was a bit of a turning point in Coronation Street's history. Like, we're going to have more issues-based storylines around then. And that they'd already had Hayley introduced and being, we're going to tackle transgender issues. But it was really around this point when Corrie moved away from being so, light-hearted and issues or family issues or issues between neighbours, we're going to teach you about the importance social issues
of
of
getting
the time.
Pregnant when you're 12. I think that this was a golden era for Coronation Street, and it maybe this was a watershed moment, I'm not sure, but it made the papers, and I think Corrie was on a roll here with that.
Yeah, well, they were widely praised for the story and raising the
way
issue.
they handled it and stuff.
I think people were a bit nervous when they heard about it and thinking, well, this could be a train wreck. But actually, they did a good job raising the issue, and there's some good actresses involved. With Helen Worth and Tina O'Brien did a cracking job, and I think the character of Sarah Lou was recast maybe like the previous year or so, just so that this storyline could be properly played out with a decent young actress. Moving on down the list, we got Joshua Peacock. When Maxine was pregnant with him, that was another... It was a bit of a who's the daddy, apart from the fact that we kind of knew who the dad was, and it wasn't Ashley. So Ashley and Maxine had been married for a little while by then. They decided to go and to try and start a baby, but it turned out
start a family.
What
with
the jump leads, yeah. But they couldn't because Ashley had fertility problems. So when he was in hospital having his bits and pieces fixed, this is when Maxine and their doctor, Matt Ramsden, who lived next door or 2 doors along, I can't remember, they got drunk and got busy together. And
that's why we're not allowed doctors on the show anymore.
And little Joshua was conceived. So that was quite scandalous as well, I suppose. What about do you remember Tracey's pregnancy with Amy? Tracey seems to have been pregnant a lot, and she's had a lot of miscarriages as well. Well, maybe it's being inflated in my mind, but...
Well, no, yeah, I know what you mean. So this was when she tried to convince Roy that he had been the father. She drugged and bedded him. She didn't actually do anything, but she made him think they had. and then she announced she was pregnant, and it was Roy's baby, and they even got married so that he would be able to have rights on the child. So, but obviously it was actually Steve's, because it was Amy.
Yeah, but I think
not Patience.
I can't remember how long into the pregnancy, or even whether it was after the birth, that it turned out that we knew that actually Roy wasn't the father. I think it was still during the pregnancy that the true parentage was revealed. But it was a interesting a little story for Roy to get involved in, because obviously he's not that kind of person to be jumping into bed with anyone, but it just goes to show that nobody is safe from being involved in some kind of sordid one-night stand pregnancy dramas, not even Roy. And I think it was also quite good because it involved a nice slapping session between Tracey and Hayley as well. And obviously we got to see just how patient Hayley was to be able to put up with this whole thing.
Yeah, she was really lovely, wasn't she? She was not happy when it happened, but she supported Roy. Just so you know, I wouldn't do that for you.
Oh, thanks. What about now our character of the week this week, Sean. Even we were saying even everyone can get involved in this pregnancy drama. Even the gay character of the street, one of the only gay characters back in 2008. But even he is a dad, as we know, the lovely Dylan now. Gemma, what's the story behind Violet's pregnancy?
Well, she had a baby with Sean because neither of them thought that they could. What? Yeah, Violet didn't think she could get pregnant.
No, she didn't think that anyone would want to get her pregnant. I think they kind of had a drunken pact that if nobody would have them by their 30th birthday, then they would have a baby together. So they decided to go through with it and have a bit of a...
He was a very enthusiastic father. Violet didn't really want him to be involved that much, but she overestimated how interested Sean would be, and I think this kind of it shows maybe how people misinterpret people that are gay as choosing not to have a family. There's kind of this notion that if you're gay you're not going to be able to have a family, which is kind of disappearing these days, but back in those days it was pretty much accepted that you wouldn't have a family if you were gay, and perhaps the people that think that gay people choose to be gay even more so would think that, well, you don't want to have a family, or you've chosen a lifestyle that means you can't have a family. So this kind of blindsided Violet, because she thought he would just let her have this baby herself. But he was so excited about it that he even tricked Marcus, who was his boyfriend at the time, who was I can't
remember whether he was his boyfriend at the time,
they went out
to get,
whatever that they had been dating, or they were dating, or whatever. Yeah. They were close. He was what they called?
He was the sonographer.
That's it. I was thinking stenographer, but that's something else. He tricked Marcus into revealing the gender of the baby, but Violet didn't want to know, so that was annoying. So she gets annoyed with him, pushes him away, and she says, "You're not a father, you're a donor."
Yeah, I think that they were probably going to be... The plan was for them to be a little bit closer before this happened, but Sean's over-enthusiasm, and he's certainly a character that everyone would agree gets enthusiastic by things, and he likes the drama of things. I think that this didn't help him. And also around the time she was getting a bit closer to Jamie Baldwin as well. So in the end, it was him that turned out to be the one to raise old Dylan.
Another thing that's relevant to what happened this week was Sarah's pregnancy with Billy Platt, because that was between Sarah and Todd, who they obviously slept together because they were going out together. But then she split up with Todd when she was still pregnant with Billy, and that's when she discovered that he was gay. So there's a bit more of their history there, in case you hadn't been watching it, or maybe you'd forgotten that happened over about 12 years ago now. Another memorable pregnancy, Maria, when she was pregnant with Liam. So we just was it last week that we did Liam Connor as the character profile, I think. So we kind of know a bit about that then. She found out that she was pregnant just as he was getting hit and run down by one of Tony Gordon's henchmen. But then throughout the pregnancy, Tony Gordon got closer to her, and in the end he was there when she gave birth on the beach. Now we've had a couple of pregnancies that have been the result of affairs between characters, and Molly Dobbs was her pregnancy and child was
quite a big story in the run up to the 50th anniversary episodes. Now, a lot of people have got very what's the opposite of fond memories of when
Bitter, no.
of when Molly and Kevin had that affair, because Molly was Tyrone's ex-wife, and didn't they go jogging together
I
or
was just
something?
thinking about
Molly
that.
and
They
Kevin?
went off jogging together all the time, and
Jogging
that
turned
was
to
their-
dogging, and dogging, snogging, and and
all of those
basically
lovely things.
Molly got pregnant, and all throughout the pregnancy, Tyrone didn't realise that the baby wasn't his. Obviously, you wouldn't do, because this affair was being kept secret. So in the end, Kevin had to do a DNA test to find out that he actually was the dad in the end. A few more young pregnancies as well to go along with Sarah Lou's back in 2000. So in 2011, we had
This was
Katie
so
and
annoying.
Chesney getting pregnant.
Katie and Chesney, they were, what, they 16?
I couldn't
I
have been
don't
much
think
more
she
than that.
even had done her GCSEs.
Bless
Excuse
you.
me.
Bless you.
So they were very young, and they because they were going out with each other, they kind of got this weird delusion that they were going to start a
Grown
family
up.
together, and they were adults and things. And it's all very cute when a 6-year-old goes to school and come back and says, "Mummy, I'm married and I'm going to get a job," and you're like, ha ha ha. But Katie and Chesney were kind of doing the same thing, because they were 16. They decided they were going to get a family. They were going to start a family. So she got pregnant. And then she tried to hide it, because Owen, her father, was obviously a bit of a scary dude, and I don't think he was very happy with this arrangement, because she's not really. I mean, really, if you think about it, she was only 4 years older than Sarah Louise was when she had hers, and Sarah Louise was so young. And Katie and Chesney, I wouldn't say that they were immature, but I'm not going to say that they were the most sensible of.
Well, Chesney was like the child, the Peter Pan child that never grew up as well. You kind of, even back then especially, you kind of remembered him being the little boy with the dog and the puppy dog eyes.
Yeah, and this is when they also killed off Schmeichel almost.
It was close to them, wasn't it?
To kill Chesney's childhood and youth.
Yeah. Grown up too quickly, but what's he done with it now? Now he's working in a kebab shop.
Yeah, so
Dreams.
much potential waste.
No, there was also drama in that pregnancy as well, because she almost had an abortion, because this is when John State was going on one of his final rampages, and he kidnapped Chesney along with Charlotte Hoyle's parents, I think it was, and Katie thought that Chesney had abandoned her, so she goes off to the clinic to get the procedure done, but she doesn't in the end.
Phew.
I think he gets out and stops her. Big pregnancy storyline, which it took a long time for them to actually get around to doing this issue, was surrogacy back in 2013. And it seems like if you're writing a soap opera and thinking, how can I do a pregnancy a little bit different, surrogacy would come to mind, wouldn't it? It's like,
yeah.
Why did it take them so long? But
it's
it
not
did
really
anyway.
a common thing though, even now.
Oh, it's not, but that doesn't stop soaps doing anything.
Okay.
If soaps only had common things happening in them, it wouldn't be it'd be over
okay,
after a few
but-
years. So
Yeah, right.
Tina was Gary and Izzy's surrogate mum, because hadn't she got pregnant before Izzy, and then because of complications with her with a condition and everything, it turned out that she wasn't able to
I don't think
conceive herself.
you're usually allowed to be a surrogate of your first child. Now, they wanted Katie to be the surrogate for this, or Katie was offering, but Tina, in the end, she had money troubles because of...
That was because of Terry Duckworth,
Terry,
wasn't
yeah.
it? Yeah.
So she wanted the money to
Repay
pay
the
off
loan
the debts
sharks
and
and
stuff.
everything. Yeah.
So she carried the child, and it got a bit weird because Gary started to become attracted to her because she was carrying his child. It was definitely Izzy and Gary's baby that they had made in a lab, and then they
didn't show that scene.
Popped the little
Just have to imagine
embryos in Tina's cozy womb, and she incubated it for them. And they were doing things like going off to
Antenatal
classes, and Izzy couldn't get in because of her wheelchair, so she'd look through the window and watch them sort of holding one another, because everyone assumed that they were going out with each other because they were
I
at
did
this
feel
mother
bad
and
for
baby.
Izzy during that, I remember.
Yeah, so yeah, I felt bad, and then eventually Gary ended up trying to go in for a snog with Tina. She was a bit oblivious to his attraction up until this moment, and that didn't go well either. But the baby was born in the end.
Big storyline, but I think with the characters involved, then I don't remember us being hugely invested in it. But that was back when the podcast was on.
It did make me think, I would quite like to sell my eggs. How much can I get for them?
Cash. Now we've recently had, well, I say recently, 3 years ago, we had Kylie pregnant with Lily Platt, and that was a massive storyline. That was the biggest Who's the Daddy storyline that Corrie had ever done, I think, because she had slept with Nick during a falling out with David the previous Christmas. Then she decided to go and have an abortion when she realised that the baby might not be David's, but David stops her having the abortion. He continues to believe that the baby's his until he overhears Gail and Kylie talking about it. Do you remember him sitting up the stairs, overhearing them discussing it and having a little cry, very sad? And then this then led to a massive hate campaign on David's part against his brother Nick, like causing trouble at the bistro, and didn't he get like the health inspectors in or something like that? But it eventually culminated in the lorry crash, which is the stem of Nick's brain injuries. So that was a massive storyline for the Platts there.
Yeah, I kind of like the way that as we've got further into the show and just your normal vanilla pregnancies have become far too common and boring. Every time somebody gets pregnant, it has to be either an absolute disaster or a weird science experiment. People threatening to have abortions or having children with people that they don't want to have children with. How many times have we, the last
10 years or so, there's been very few babies that have just like been normal. Like
I think
Kirsty and Tyrone's baby when Ruby was
to be born of love and a stable relationship was Ruby in 2012.
Even then, Tyrone was getting beaten up afterwards. So it was just
now her mum's in prison.
Yeah.
Fizz and John, another pair of lunatics.
But I don't remember there being massive drama when Fizz was pregnant. I mean, the birth is another matter.
Probably the last time somebody was born in a normal marriage was Freddie, Claire and Ashley's son.
Yeah.
And he was born in 2006 and he's not even in it anymore. Do you know why? Because it's boring.
Gotta ask John. This is the thing, isn't it? If you're going to have so many pregnancy storylines, then you just got to make them. You got to make them exciting. It's like the pregnancy is the catalyst for other drama, and sometimes it's the pregnancy doesn't even turn out to be the focus.
To be fair, it's not like they need to have characters be pregnant to keep the flow of characters coming.
No.
In fact, in a way, I think that they sometimes view a successful pregnancy as a bit of a hindrance almost, because they've got to have these child actors, they've got to explain why they're not there when they're not around. They've got to have a potentially boring character written into the show for 10 years or so. They've got to scout for these actors. They've got to hire the right people. If they get someone who's really good, they've got to hope that this person's going to want to stay in the show. It's a massive headache, isn't it?
Well, unless you just do what they did with baby Miley recently last year and just ship her off as soon as she's born, because that very much was the story of Faye's pregnancy, wasn't it? It was they were maybe a little bit short-sighted, and they thought, right, let's have another really young teenage pregnancy.
It's just like handing your baby to an awkward male relative. It's like, what do I do with it? What do I do with it? Take it away from me. I don't want it.
I did really enjoy Faye's pregnancy storyline and the little bond that she had with Craig and everything during that, which has seemed to have disappeared now. There hasn't been much Craig and Faye for ages, has there?
That's because of Caitlin or whatever.
Oh yeah.
But I kind of liked what they did with it, because it really was the only thing that made any sense.
What?
Get rid of the baby.
After it was born?
Yeah.
It didn't. It was, the baby wasn't needed.
There are quite a few people I think would pay good money to have someone take the baby away and bring it back when it's 16. And maybe I'm not speaking about myself, but who knows?
I wouldn't be surprised if we see Miley again in
I'm sure
5,
we will.
10 years'
This is
time.
what we were saying about Bethany.
Yeah,
Bethany's going to come back all
bring her
hot
back
and
with a proper actress. Yeah. I'm sure they're just around the corner. And I suppose that leads us to our most recent successful pregnancy. Harry. Not exactly the most trouble-free one, because he was the son of a dead drug dealer. whose the father was killed in the same room as the mum.
That's a good country song I know.
What?
Murdered Spawn. Spawn of a Murdered Drug Dealer. Famous song.
Is it?
No.
It could be. There's a lot of things.
That was the joke.
Yeah, so Harry Platt, recent pregnancy. Sarah Louise thought that he would obviously turn and be a spawn of Satan or something when he was born, and be able to sense that the father is buried underneath the ground. But
I thought this was good because of how crazy it made her and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. That was
So
cool.
those were all the pregnancies that were successful. Like
The
you
interesting
say.
ones.
Let's talk about the
happy
unpleasant
unpleasant.
world
Right, sorry.
of abortions. Now, I have a suspicion that abortion is not the word that people use anymore.
Terminations.
Because they're called terminations, and I don't know quite when this happened.
I don't know. Now, as we said earlier, there weren't any abortions in Coronation Street, successful ones, as far as I know, until 1999. Now, obviously, back when Coronation Street started, abortion was illegal. It wasn't made legal in the UK until 1967. The first ever abortion on TV was in America in 1964. That was in the As the World Turns soap opera, and even that was an illegal abortion. So it was a really, I guess it must have been a really taboo subject, and it took Coronation Street a long time to build up the courage to actually go through it and do one. But Leanne Tilsley was the first character to have an abortion back in 1999, and this is when she and Nick were together. I think they'd got married the previous year.
Can I just say,
go on.
Attitudes to abortion in the UK are very relaxed.
Well, they've got more so, haven't they? A lot more recently.
You've got this statistic that in 2012 only 7% of the UK responded to say that they think it should be illegal for women to have abortions.
Yeah.
But on the whole, I think it's supposed to be only if there's a medical reason, but the well-being and stress of the mother is taken into consideration to say, like, the thing is about abortions is that people seem to think that you can just go, I don't want a baby.
Yeah, it's not a subject that's taken lightly, is it?
But it's actually like hugely, horribly stressful, and I think also because we're a country that pays out a lot of money for people, we a very socialist country, and there's lots of benefits for people, so it's in the government's best interest to limit unwanted pregnancies, because they really don't do society very well, because you get the burden of the healthcare costs of bringing the child to term, and then delivering the child, and then all of the support that the mother gets from benefits and all of that, and then the cost of the education, and is it going to be
expensive business?
Yeah, exactly. So the government has obviously weighed the pros and cons, and people on the whole, I think, wouldn't look down on someone for having an abortion. They would just feel sorry for them for having to make a horrible decision. And that is very much the perspective that Coronation Street takes, is that it's a hard and horrible decision to make, and not taken lightly, but often will be the best solution in a horrible situation.
Yeah, what springs to mind immediately was Carla's recent pregnancy, which she ended up miscarrying, but she was going to have an abortion, wasn't she? And we had those really harrowing scenes in the abortion clinic where she was like crying and that she doesn't know whether to go through with this, and that just showed it's not just a simple case of going in there, getting rid of it, and then go back on with your normal life.
Yeah,
and the first Coronation Street abortion, this one with Leanne, this was because Nick was just horrified about the idea of becoming a father. He demands that she has an abortion and tells everyone it was a miscarriage. So Nick seemed to be the bad guy in this story back here, and they ended up divorcing soon after. So it kind of showed how abortions it might be able to solve one problem, but the family it can be very difficult, and the ramifications for them can be just as devastating.
Well, this was kind of a negative portrayal of that, because she didn't want to have this baby because of him, and he kind of forced her to have one.
Yeah.
And then we've got Charlie Ramsden and Matt Ramsden in 2002, and she didn't want to have children, so she had an abortion, which...
I think I don't remember much about the story.
No, I know, but I'm just going to say, this is not, again, a sympathetic portrayal of a termination, because it seems like a very flippant reason to have an abortion, because especially in this country, all kinds of contraception are absolutely free for anybody to... And obviously, I know
Matt
that
Ramsden was a doctor. He should have had.
Yeah, I know that it fails, and that can happen. But I always also think to myself, any time
I can't remember
you do
what
anything like you know that there could be a child at the end of it. So
I can't remember how they managed
to get
pregnant.
Well, no, I know, but if you don't ever want children, wouldn't you get your bits tied or get him to
Well, they've had a few vasectomy stories in Coronation Street in the past, haven't
but
they?
yeah, I think that a lot of people on the list of reasons why you should have an abortion, a lot of people wouldn't put "I don't want kids" high on that list. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying I agree or disagree with that, but I am also putting only saying about contraception to give it a perspective for people that maybe don't live in the UK and don't know. But we are like, it's absolutely free. You can, if you're on the contraceptive pill in the UK, usually you have to pay a prescription charge for any medicine that you get given by the doctor, which is about £8, something or other like that. But you don't even have to pay for this. It's free, and there's so many different types. I don't know about in 2002, but these days you go to the doctor and they will try to
throw them at you.
Yeah, they just don't want you to have any more children.
It's like in France, isn't it, where you can't walk down one street without seeing a condom machine on the wall.
Yeah.
It's not quite like that here. But
no.
Now, we also had another termination in 2003 when Maria just got... This is a bit of I suppose, the most flippant abortion that there's been. She, as far as I remember, she slept with Toya's boyfriend, and Toya was a flatmate at the time, and it was just like, whoops, better have an abortion then. I don't remember much else about it. But then... it became much bigger issue when Katie Harris was pregnant with Martin Platt's baby in 2005. Now, we talked about being able to go on the pill to not have babies if you want to, but if I remember it right, and I didn't get this off Coropedia, but I'm sure I remember it, she kind of tricked Martin into thinking she was still taking her pill when actually she wasn't, because she wanted to have a baby, and this was he was 20 years older.
Good old
than her.
trap babies.
But she thought this was this wonderful man, and she'd stay with forever because she was so young and a bit naive about it. So she wanted to trap him with a baby, I guess. Now, when once she was pregnant, her dad, Tommy Harris, who was a real hothead, did not like the idea at all. He wasn't obviously even supportive of Katie going out with this older man, but he told her that Martin was having an affair. So she then went and had an abortion. So she was tricked by her own dad into having this abortion. And I suppose it came in. She got her own back on him with the help of a wrench in the garage. Not long afterwards, she ended up killing her dad. So don't trick people into having abortions is our lesson from that one.
Don't do it. Right. So the next one was Tina and David. 2008.
Another one where a parent suggests an abortion and comes off worse.
Yeah, so Tina's pregnant. She's with David's child, but he's getting really jealous and weird. And she speaks to Gail about it, and Gail never really wanted Tina.
No.
She didn't really like her that much. They never got on. And she said, "I will pay for you to have an abortion, and we'll keep it a secret between us." And then,
don't keep a secret in Coronation Street.
This is the famous moment. This is the famous lead up to David's throwing Gail down the stairs. One of my favourite ever Coronation Street moments. No, just moments.
Just moments.
General, yeah.
Okay.
So that didn't end too well
for Gail, though.
Then we have probably one of the boringest abortions. Poor Natasha, who was always so mistreated by the show, and only ever really had a good exit, and that was the best scene she was ever in. But Natasha and Nick obviously she got pregnant. She only found this out after Nick had dumped her. And he's got such a horrible attitude, because this isn't the first time that he's sort of blackmailed somebody into
Yeah, if
not
it was
having
just like
a
with
kid.
Leanne, wasn't it? 10 years earlier.
It's kind of surprising that he doesn't have any children, really.
Yeah.
Because it's like he's only ever got 2 women pregnant. And he's managed to convince both of them to have abortions. Anyway, I wonder, Phil, watch out, Leanne, because if Nick knows you're pregnant, that's probably why she doesn't want to tell him. Anyway, he said she told him that she was pregnant, and he's like, I'm not getting back with you. Well, she said, I'm going to have a baby.
Children. Let's get back together. And he's like, nope.
Then she says, I've had an abortion, and he's like, well, no, I just decided that I wanted to have a child.
Too late, Nick.
And she had also pretended that she was pregnant, and this is when Gail got herself fired from the medical place because she read her records when.
Yeah, Natasha continued to pretend to be pregnant despite having had the abortion because Nick decided he did want to be a dad. Yeah, and then
it wasn't written very well.
Sorry for my poorly written notes, but yeah. So that was the last successful termination we've had in 2010. It seems like so long ago, and there's been many trips to the abortion clinic since.
Yeah, that's the thing. You're probably listening to this going, 6? There's only ever been 6 abortions on the show. Actually, the amount of times people have gone to the clinic and then not had one, or said they were going to, or had it as an option, or had discussed whether or not to, is way higher than this number. And the one I always remember, and the one that upset me the most, was when Carla went to go and have her abortion, and she was crying and she couldn't decide, and then she decided not to, but then we know how that turned out.
Yeah, I think what our lesson is from that this terminations talk as well is, if you're a member of the Platt family, you're pretty lucky to be alive, because there have been Platt abortions, there have been Platt near abortions. Nick's been involved in, well, David was nearly aborted, Sarah Lou was nearly aborted, Lily was nearly aborted, and considering the Platts are one of the main families of the street, it could have been a completely different situation if some of these had come true, or it would have been a little bit different.
Now, if you're a writer and you want a character to get pregnant for the drama, but you don't want to bother with casting an actress or an actor to play the baby for the next 15 years.
Or even an actress to play the nurse in the abortion clinic.
Yeah. You can always... And you also don't want the character to have the stigma of having an abortion. You can always go for the easy option, which is a miscarriage.
Yeah, and there have been a few more miscarriages in Coronation Street. There have
been 14 miscarriages in Coronation Street, and the thing is about miscarriages is that it's a lot more common than people admit, and it's only recently, really, that people have started to speak about them openly, because, yeah, it is quite a common thing, and it's almost a bit sad. It's kind of, on the one hand, I'm glad that Coronation Street talks about it to, make people aware that it's, and people can cope with it and stuff. But on the other hand, it almost feels like it is used, because I was being sarcastic, but it kind of is used as a get out of jail free card if your character gets pregnant. Yeah. Yeah,
I found that roughly 10 to 20% of known pregnancies end in miscarriage, but I don't know how well you can.
What, in real life?
In real life, yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas in Coronation Street, it's been a lot more than that. I mean, I've got in the 60s, when there weren't many pregnancies anyway, of course, 20% were miscarriages. In the 70s, in the 70s, 50% of pregnancies ended in miscarriages. But you can't really count this as anything, really, because there were so few pregnancies. In the last 6 years, though, 43.8% of pregnancies have ended in miscarriage. So that kind of backs up what you were saying about the pregnancy being used for drama, but then saying, no, actually, let's not go there.
And also, over the time, the chances of a character who was pregnant to actually give birth has dropped reduced. quite a lot. So it was 84% likely to give birth in the 90s, and then in the 2000s it's 65%. And this decade, you got a 50-50 chance. So
you get pregnant of actually carrying it to term.
So anyway,
let's go. The first miscarriage in Coronation Street was Irma Barlow, so the née Ogden, and David Barlow in 1968. Irma had a miscarriage after 4 months. she was then convinced that she could never have children, but she did. They went off and moved to Australia, had a bit of a car crash, but she did manage to have a baby.
Yeah.
And we had Emily Bishop even had a miscarriage, and I didn't even realise this because I don't think it was a huge thing at the time. I certainly can't find very much information about it online, but not long after they got pregnant, Emily had a miscarriage, and if anyone can tell me shed any more light on that, then please do. But one of the first biggest miscarriages I remember that was probably quite affecting to watch it at the time was when Beck Gilroy had one in 1988. Now, the big thing there was that she was so old, although, I mean, not ancient, obviously. 47 she was when
Well,
when
this
she
was
got
in
pregnant.
1988, and
She'd only just found out that she was pregnant, and I think it was a bit of a shock for her and Alec. But it was just a few days later, she realised, or she had this miscarriage, and they had to put a brave face on. And
miscarriages are so sad.
I know.
So sad and horrible.
Well, and Beck Gilroy was such a beloved character,
Horrible.
And I think viewers really saw her kind of suffer through this. And Alec wasn't particularly. I mean, he didn't want to be a father then anyway, but she'd been able to talk him round to the idea, and then this miscarriage came along, and it was a real challenge for them as a couple to go through.
We had a miscarriage every decade. So 60s it was Irma Barlow, the 70s it was Emily Bishop, the 80s it was Beck Gilroy, the 90s it was Denise Osborne, that was 1994.
But then she went and had a baby with Ken anyway. So.
And then then there was a big gap of 10 years before they really, really went for gold and decided to have as many possible that they could do
as possible.
Ramped up really so much in the last 10, 12 years. So 2004 was when Karen had her miscarriage. It was Steve's baby, and this is when Tracey gave her the nickname Baron Karen. She really wanted to have a baby
because her relationship with Steve was a bit rocky at the time, and she was determined to get pregnant to cement it. And I remember her miscarriage because I can't remember how long she'd been pregnant, but maybe only a few months at the time, or maybe she'd only just found out, possibly, I can't remember. But she was at an underworld Christmas party, and they were doing the sort of sitting on the floor doing their "We Are Sailing," I think, moving around and having a jolly good lark at the Christmas do, and then she lost the baby.
I don't think you can say that's.
It wasn't. I don't think it was what caused it at all.
No, because
She was messing around and having a lark.
People are always so quick to blame the woman and say, judge her for, eating brie or whatever. But, I mean, it's only recently that we've understood how much these things can affect babies in childhood and, when they're in the womb. And, back when we were babies, people were still smoking and drinking when they were pregnant. So, how much can a bit of brie really?
Well, she was having a bit of a laugh on the factory floor. I just remember her in the line with all the other factory girls, and then she cramps over, and then she has this baby, and this was the beginning of the end.
She has a baby? You mean she has a miscarriage?
And this is the beginning of the end for Karen, because she then went on a bit of a rampage afterwards, stole Amy away, set Tracey's car on fire, I think, and she'd left by Christmas. So that was a quick and sad end to one of my favourite Corrie characters from the early 2000s.
So then we had a few years before 2007, Violet Wilson and Jamie Baldwin miscarried, and then 2009 it was Claire and Ashley Peacock, and then they decided to go for one every year pretty much after that, because 2010 was Becky and Steve twice.
Yeah, Becky had
issues,
fertility issues, and
until she realised that actually she would never be able to conceive a child,
which was tragic, because that
she
was what
always
really
wanted to be a mother.
Wasn't she? Yeah,
always.
That was horrible. And
then we had Peter and Leanne. This is why she thinks that she can't have a child now, because in 2011, she was pregnant. She rowed with Peter over Carla, fell down the stairs, had a miscarriage, and then she thought she was infertile, but
oh no.
the doctor told her recently, no, you're not, because you're pregnant. Again, Tracey and Steve's always at the centre of these things.
He really is. I mean, he's pretty good at getting women pregnant, but doesn't always follow through.
No. all these grand plans.
Good start, but
not a good finish.
Yeah.
So they have a
lesson there for the Olympians, just going off the starting blocks.
You've got to maintain your performance.
Yeah.
So anyway, they have a one-night stand, and Steve's trying to get to have an abortion, but she doesn't want to go through with it. So he says, "I'll support you." Steve, remember this for Leanne's pregnancy. Then she thinks he's back with Becky again, confronts her, collapses, and has a miscarriage. And this is when she starts to say that Becky pushed her, and people kind of believe it because they think Becky's jealous because she wants.
Yeah,
she
everyone
wants
turned
Steve's
against Becky, and this is when
baby.
she revealed just on a leaving episode, didn't she, that actually this wasn't true. I didn't push her.
Yeah.
Here's the proof. And
so Leanne and Tracey's were both 2011. Then 2012, Izzy had a miscarriage because of her condition,
leading up to the surrogacy.
And that's what led to that. And then we had a gap. We had a nice year off in 2013, which is weird because 13 is an unlucky number. But we just
irony.
2014, Carla's miscarriage. Like I said before, she was going to have an abortion before. Decided to keep it, and then when Tina was murdered, she got a bit too stressed.
Yeah, because she was a suspect, Peter was a suspect, and
it didn't
work out. That was the end of that baby.
And then the other most recent miscarriage was Erica's with Nick in 2015, and she was. This was the other one that really, these past two ones, Carla's upset me and Erica's did, because she never thought she'd be able to have children. Both these women are kind of like dear to my heart because they didn't think they would have children. Then they were told, here you are, here's your chance, and then it got taken away. And I think it's the saddest thing ever. She conceived this child with Nick during a fling. She didn't think she thought she was too old because she was 50. She was 50, and then she had a miscarriage, and they said, "Oh, it's not because you're old. It's just one of those things." That was absolutely tragic. She had all these plans for what she was going to do, and
that was the one time as well that Claire King actually got to do some proper acting as Erica. She's still yet to bloom, to bloom and have a proper role on the show, really, rather than a supporting role. But she got just proper acting now.
See,
did good.
The other thing about Erica and Carla is that they're not particularly maternal women.
No, I remember us talking, especially about Carla at the time, about what kind of mum she's going to be.
That is what I wanted to know. I wish they would challenge the kind of perception of motherhood as being for young women only, and let's see an older woman and see how she copes. And they could have had so many great, things in that storyline. Like taking a child out, and people would be like, "Oh, are you the grandma or something?" That kind of thing. How would she cope with that?
Got the opposite with Liz, didn't we? When she actually was the grandma, and they said, "I'm the mum." That storyline's gone nowhere.
I just thought that was a missed opportunity, and also there must be women who are older, who are going through this or want to go through this or want hope, or
it would have been really interesting to see. I mean, in real life, the average age for having a baby now is 34, I found, so that's obviously a way off from, say, Erica's situation, but that's
not a first child, obviously.
No, the average mum gives birth at 34, and that I don't think Coronation Street really reflects that, does it? It's very much something for late teens, early 20s characters to have. So
this is why it's good that Leanne and Michelle are pregnant.
Yeah.
Michelle's not pregnant, is she?
No, not yet.
But we're all just assuming that they are actually going to have a baby. But I guess actually...
Well, so if they do get pregnant, it's going to be a bit different. I mean, you say, "Oh, here's the character's pregnant, here we go again." But having a slightly older woman get pregnant will actually be quite different for Corrie. We had Andrea being pregnant last year. Didn't count on the list because she gave birth off screen. There's been some other pregnancies off screen that we haven't really mentioned, but that would have been quite interesting to see her have the baby.
But don't forget, they've only got a 50-50 chance this decade. So one or the other.
One of the other's going to have it, yeah. And if they wanted to have any other mums in their 30s, all that really leaves now is Fizz and Maria, I think. I think they both got a bit of a shot. Maria, more so than Fizz, I think, could have a shot of being given a pregnancy storyline just to give her something to do. I think that Fizz and Tyrone are pretty settled now, although saying that it would be quite nice for them to have a baby that is theirs, because obviously we've got Hope, who's John's baby, and Ruby, who's Kirsty's baby. It'd be quite nice to have a proper Fizz and Tyrone baby together.
I think that too. I don't see why any of these people can't have children. I think they need to move a bit more into the demographic of this. Also, I kind of feel as though the only ever, I mean, I don't mean this in an offensive way, but normal family, you know, like mum, dad, married,
Nuclear
had two
family.
children. I feel like that only happens to families that move to the street. They come to the street with their little family, and then one by one they die or go missing or something.
Goes wrong.
But why can't we have a couple on the street that does that thing that?
I know, it's almost like they've wanted to move away from the norm so much that it doesn't even exist anymore.
Wouldn't it be lovely to have that happen? I mean, there's lots of children on the street, because we spoke recently about kids on the street. What do we think is going to be their future? I hope and dream for the children of the future, Michael, that one of them, their destiny is 2.4 children, married, with a cat and a dog.
Why not? Cat, definitely. You've got some dogs on Corrie.
No cats on the street.
We can also, we were saying about how Coronation Street doesn't particularly reflect the rising age in mothers. It does reflect in real life how few pregnancies occur in wedlock these days. Back in 1990 in Coronation Street, all of the characters to give birth on the show were within wedlock. In the 2000s...
I don't like that phrase, wedlock.
In a married couple. In the 2000s, only 50% of births were... I think that was pregnancies or births, I can't remember. I think it was pregnancies were between married couples.
You've written pregnancies, so...
Yeah, okay then. And in this decade, 64% have been out of wedlock, I think. I think that was statistic is right there. So it's just massively rising how few...
Yeah, in real life, 57% of pregnancies were outside of marriage. I think that is really not what I expected. I thought more people don't get married these days.
Well, that's still pretty high, 57% of pregnancies out of marriage. And of those, 69% actually resulted in a birth. So I don't know how many actual births are...
out of marriage,
outside of marriage, but it's but then if you could look at the statistics for real life beforehand, it was really shrinking. Like in 1980, only 12% of pregnancies were outside of marriage. So in a way, I suppose Coronation Street does reflect that quite well. I think
Coronation Street reflects also the way that people view children and marriage. Because I'm very traditional, and I think if you're serious with somebody, I don't know why you wouldn't get married to them and then start a family, whereas a lot of people seem to have a baby and then go, I think we're serious, let's get married. But on Corrie, I would say that they kind of like the kind of organic biology of the situation is more urgent than the kind of like the social construct of marriage. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
so
sometimes
the urgent biology of having the baby is the thing that
and the drama that will be around having a pregnant lady is more
first. Yeah. So I guess you could argue almost that it's more natural to have a baby first and then decide that you're going to get married afterwards. But
yeah, there have been characters in the show pre-1990 though that were born out of wedlock. We just didn't see it. For example, we had Betty had this son. In fact, a lot of the unmarried parents back in the early days of Coronation Street would give away children.
Oh yeah.
Or would have been given away, sorry. So we had Betty. We found out that she was actually Gordon Clegg's secret mum. Gordon was adopted by Betty's sister Maggie. We found out that Bet Lynch had a baby when she was 16, but had him adopted. I know this wasn't a character back then, but we found out that Norris's mum gave birth to Ramsay when she was very young, unmarried. He was then shipped off to Australia, which is why we didn't know about him. Audrey had Stephen, off to Canada he goes. It's just that it goes on and on and on. It just shows that back then it was, I guess, so much more the norm for if you were an unmarried parent, this was something obviously to be shamed of, and the only option is to ship them off somewhere else. Even Sheila Birtles, who was a character she was in the show from the beginning. She got pregnant out of wedlock in 1963. She went off in 1964, had the baby. When she came back, she'd already given the baby up. So I suppose that was the closest we got to something in the show actually being like that. We just didn't actually see this much of the pregnancy or any of the birth.
It is, but that's how it used to be, though.
Mm.
Like, they would go away and come back, and everyone would suspect, but probably not challenge them.
And you'd have to just try and carry on as normal. And
even recently, there was women in mental institutions that were only there because they'd had a child out of wedlock.
Mm.
But they, it got to the point where you can't release them because they're completely institutionalised.
Yeah.
Insane. This is what I keep saying about our attitude to morality and stuff. It's just changing so rapidly, for like in a positive way. But it is kind of astounding. In someone's lifetime, they could have gone from children outside of wedlock, a bunch of bastards, you send a woman away. Gays shouldn't be married or even exist, blah blah blah. Woman is a woman and a man is a man, and now you've got people changing their genders and men getting married, and nobody really, like, there's no tolerance for people who don't approve of it at all.
No, not at all.
It's good, but it's kind of shocking how fast it's happened.
What will we accept in 50 years?
Who knows? It's going to be probably people marrying aliens.
So another thing that I noticed out of all these storylines, that there were actually a lot fewer pregnancies brought on by one-night stands than you might expect, because that seems to be that if a character has a one-night stand, you think, one of them's going to be pregnant. But actually, there's only, as far as I could count, 7 or 8 of Corrie pregnancies have started during one-night stands. Often they were the teenage pregnancies, like the Sarah Lou or the Faye, or Steve McDonald. He's the king of getting someone pregnant on a one-night stand. But actually, most of the rest of them take place in loving relationships, I suppose. Would you say that lack of contraception is an issue in soaps very much? With this, people getting pregnant, it seems like if they go to bed together, you never see the contraception. Obviously, they never really talk about it that much. So it's not surprising that these one night stands end in pregnancies.
I think they often will make an excuse of, like, if they want to blame the characters, they'll say, we just didn't think of it, or it was caught up in the moment or something. But if they just want the drama of the dynamic between the characters, or in this situation, what will this character do now that she's pregnant, they will say, well, the condom broke, or I took the pill, or I forgot to take the pill, or because no method is 100% guaranteed to work.
One of the main times that I think that they mention contraception in the soaps is when you have the first, I can think of 2 or 3 examples where the boys have been saying, I'm gonna have sex for the first time, and I've got to do my embarrassing trip to Deb's ask for it, and it's kind of made into a bit of a comedy section, or condomedy, I suppose you could call it.
Condomedy.
So I suppose maybe it's just not one of those things that's you want to hear about when we're watching Coronation Street at 7:30 on a weekday evening. It's a bit too much information.
I know, that's the thing. It's like everyone knows these things happen, but you don't want to think about it.
So we're pretty much towards the end of this discussion now. I think we're wrapping it up. Is there any kind of...
Wrapping it up.
What?
That's what they say, wrap it up.
Is there any possible future pregnancy-related dramas that they haven't yet done on Coronation Street? Like what? Because we were saying in the last 10 years or so, you can almost not have a pregnancy unless there's some kind of major drama or issue related to it. I don't know whether they've had any like IVF babies or anything in Coronation Street. That could be somewhere they could go down, or
No, they didn't, but they did have the adoption thing came from that, didn't it? Because the characters, it was Becky and Steve, and then Anna. It was Anna, wasn't it?
Yeah, Anna and Eddie.
And they all wanted to have children, but they were having difficulty, and then they both went through the adoption instead of IVF.
Yeah.
Which is kind of makes me think Coronation Street's like, don't be wasteful, recycle. Don't get a new one.
Do you think that they would have? Do you think they'd have a storyline about like risks of drinking and smoking during pregnancy?
See, this is what I don't know, because I was mentioning it before, but the people policing women's bodies makes me uncomfortable, and I would 100% agree that, you know, if you know something is harmful to your baby, then you shouldn't do it. I wouldn't want to do it, but at the same time, not only is it not 100% proven that that's the case, there are different cultures that have different opinions on what's dangerous and what isn't. And like, for example, in Asia, women aren't told not to eat raw fish because it's a big part of the diet, and they don't see a problem with it, and perhaps their way that they prepare it is a bit safer than it is here. But you're not supposed to eat raw fish, you're not supposed to eat unpasteurized cheese, you're not supposed to drink and smoke and things, and I just wonder.
It could be.
I think it would be a really interesting storyline, but they would have to be careful about it. For example, drinking only in certain periods of your pregnancy is that supposed to be a massive deal, and so in some places it's not even, people don't even worry about it. I think it's just different countries have different guidelines because of, for example, in this country we're massive binge drinkers, so it would be a good idea to say to all pregnant women, do not drink at all, because perhaps an English woman's idea of drinking is vastly different from a French woman's idea, like of having a glass of wine with a meal, whereas the average English woman is in the gutter drunk because she had 15 vodka and Red Bulls.
Yeah. Oh, well, how about, okay, so that'd be quite a taboo then. What about the whole, what about if a couple found out that they were going to have a baby with disabilities or Down syndrome or something?
This is very, very touchy subject.
I know.
Because apparently the abortion rate for children with, for example, Down syndrome is really high. It's something like 90%.
Well,
because we have this attitude, again, it comes back to this attitude of everyone's paying for this, you know, like it's more, it's better, it's cheaper. Sounds horrible to say, but it's cheaper in the long run for the medical costs involved in a disabled child. It's cheaper if we support women to terminate pregnancies. And apparently I've heard stories of women saying that they are very strongly advised to abort. The doctors won't say you must have an abortion, because obviously they're not allowed to do that, but they kind of steer you to making that decision. With
Alex in the programme now, though, that could be an interesting
that would be
angle to it. Wouldn't it? You can imagine Kathy being an advisor to whoever this child would be.
I just think that this is a far too heartbreaking a subject.
Is this a subject that's too taboo for Coronation Street that we found?
For me it is, because I feel the same way about it as I do about the cancer storylines and things. It happens and it's heartbreaking and it's unpleasant and it doesn't need to be discussed on a television show, because it's a far too frequent a thing, and it's someone's whole life, you know. It's not just a passing event that happens for a few years of someone's having hardship or something. It's something that will be with you for the rest of your life, and it happens a lot. It's not like, you know, a 1 in a million.
No,
this happens a lot.
I don't think soaps have done this then. Don't know.
No, the thing is also about if you had a disabled child and the character had a termination, that's going to be slammed by charities who are represent people from that. No, represent people from that disability. You know, you're basically advocating a kind of unborn genocide of this. That's what they call it. Of this. I mean, maybe disabilities like, I don't know.
I think if they were to have that storyline, the character would have the baby.
But that's the other thing I was going to say. If you're going to have the character have the child, then you've got to cast actors of different ages for the next 20 years with that disability.
Only if it was going to be a character that was to stay in the show. They could very well introduce a character just to be the one. She's got to make this decision. Kathy or Alex or whoever or help her make the decision to keep it. She does, and then goes off, and then we never see her again. Would be silly. But Coronation Street isn't immune to having these little storylines and then just forgetting about them.
But yeah, I agree with you. But I think that I would rather they did that with a character that was going to leave anyway. Yeah. Or a character that had been in it for a while. So say if Leanne wanted to leave, they could say, we're going to do something really controversial with you. This is the idea. But even so, I think you're messing with things that don't need to be messed with.
Okay, probably right. And any other ideas for potential storylines for pregnancy that haven't been done? Anything less?
I like what you've written here. You've written mystery pregnancy. Mum doesn't know how it happens.
That's completely soapish. I surely there could be a storyline where the mum discovers.
Not these days. You could have got away with that.
Can't you get so?
No, listen. This is what I know. What you're trying to say. You're trying to say the woman gets so blotto that she doesn't know that she's had sex, right?
Or is it? I don't know how. Can you get pregnant? You can't get pregnant from a toilet seat, can you? Or that kind of thing. Just there being.
Michael, you're in charge of sex education.
I don't have to answer that question. Can there be just this residue?
You can have virgin births. Yes.
Well, there we go then. So couldn't it be something like that? And the mum's
no, because I think the mum would know that. Oh crap! Yeah. That's only going to happen to a woman who has not had sex with someone.
Well, they could engineer that, couldn't they?
But then she would know that was the time that we fooled around, so it was then. That's not a mystery.
Okay. So then the character
what you're saying about the person being so drunk, you would have got away with that probably 10, 20 years ago, but these days that's called rape.
Is it?
Yes. If you're so drunk that you don't know what's happening, you can't consent to having sex with someone, and if you've not consented, then you've been raped. It's not like a jolly ha-ha whoopsie doo.
Yeah, but
sorry, it's misunderstanding. When you didn't respond and your eyes rolled back in your head, I thought you were giving me a come hither look.
It would be a bit of a change to the who's the daddy kind of formula, wouldn't it? Or the murder mystery formula. Literally, a character has birth and gives birth and she's got no idea where this came from.
If
they could think of a way, that'd be quite like wow.
You can't. The way people's attitudes are to women, you wouldn't be able to get away with people not judging her and saying it was her fault.
There you go, more issues.
I think it's an hilarious idea. The only way it would make any sense is if there was a series of parties and she was having sex with everybody.
So which character could be put in there then? I don't think there's even anyone that's quite so promiscuous as that. Gemma, maybe. Yeah. She was straight to bed with Jason, isn't she? And she's still a bit of a blank slate. She could have loose morals.
Loose morals. It's not loose morals. It's enjoying your God-given body.
Right, and I think
I'm sure we've offended everybody now.
Well, we try not to, but
we're trying really hard to
controversial subject.
I'm not very subtle about something. There are always going to be people that have different opinions. If we've offended you about what we said about terminations or miscarriages or anything, we apologise.
Write in and tell us off. Vent at us.
We'll read it out.
But
if you're nice. If you're nice, we'll read it out.
Yeah.
But you got to be reasonable.
And that is our storylines, Coronation Street pregnancy storylines, and we'll come back to the births another day, I expect, and have a bit of a chat about that. And I can't
believe that we planned this for this week, because Leanne and Michelle and their drama about it, and then last week there was nothing about it.
Well, there wasn't much, was there?
There was just Leanne looking anxious.
Yeah. But oh well.
She always does that.
I wanted to do originally a feature discussion about funerals, but then it turned out that when we did death last year, we also touched on funerals as well. So we went the opposite way and did pregnancies. So.